There is a distinct shift that happens to a Gen X man once he crosses into his 50s, one that corporate boardrooms, marketing algorithms, and modern culture completely fail to understand. For decades, you've played the script. You worked through recessions, built careers, raised families, absorbed losses, and carried responsibilities that younger generations can barely fathom. But somewhere around 50, something snaps. Not in a bitter way, but in a liberating way. You stop checking the scorecard. Society looks at a man at this stage and whispers about decline, slowing down, or fading into the background, but that is the greatest miscalculation they can make. What is actually happening behind the gray hair and the quiet demeanor is not a retreat, it is a recalibration, and it makes you quietly, entirely unstoppable. When you were in your 20s and 30s, life was an audition. Power looked like tangible proof, a bigger title, a louder voice in the room, a newer car, or the relentless need to win every argument and prove every detractor wrong. That was the game, and you played it well. The trap of validation. You spent years trading your peace of mind for the approval of bosses, peers, and social expectations. The fatigue of proving yourself. Every energy reserve was poured into maintaining an image, keeping up appearances, and ensuring everyone else saw your value. But here is what nobody tells you about reaching 50. The exhaustion of keeping up that performance finally outweighs the fear of dropping it. When you stop trying to impress people who don't matter, an unexpected vacuum opens up. What fills that space isn't laziness, it's absolute clarity. Watch a man in his 20s walk into a high-conflict room, and you will see a flurry of reactions, defensiveness, quick retorts, posture adjustments, and a desperate need to control the narrative. They are terrified of losing face. Now watch a Gen X man who has lived through actual friction. When someone tries to pull him into unnecessary drama, trigger his ego, or bait him into an argument, he does something deeply unsettling to manipulators. He stays completely silent. The power of the pause. He doesn't raise his voice because he no longer feels the compulsion to win a battle of words. The discomfort of silence. Younger people cannot handle dead air in a tense conversation. They feel an urgent need to fill it. But the older man lets the silence sit, turning the psychological weight back onto the person trying to manipulate him. That calm isn't coldness. It is emotional self-containment. He has survived enough real crises to know that 90% of what people scream about is just noise. Yet this quiet confidence drives controlling people crazy. Why does a man who refuses to engage become the most formidable person in any room? The answer lies in a psychological threshold that younger men cannot cross yet: desperation immunity. Desperation is a leash. If a man is desperate for validation, terrified of losing status, or addicted to luxury symbols, he is easily controlled. You can buy him, threaten him, or manipulate his insecurities. By 50, a Gen X man has usually experienced enough loss, failure, and betrayal to realize something profound. The worst-case scenario has already happened, and he survived it. Shedding the superfluous. You realize that status symbols are just expensive anchors. You realize that walking away from a toxic job, a fake friendship, or a draining environment isn't a failure, it's an upgrade. The power of no. You learn the ultimate sentence-ending power of the word no. No explanations, no apologies, no emotional accounting to justify your boundaries. When a man no longer needs your applause, your validation, or your permission to exist, his leverage over his own life becomes absolute. The world tries to convince men that aging is a subtraction, that your value diminishes the moment you stop producing at a frantic pace. But for the Gen X man at Wiser You, 50 isn't the beginning of the second half. It's the moment you finally take off the heavy equipment you were never meant to carry. You aren't loud anymore. You aren't chasing trends, proving your worth, or managing everyone else's fragile emotions. You are simply anchored in who you are. You have traded the exhausting performance of youth for the quiet, unshakable authority of experience. And that is why when a man stops needing the world's approval, he finally becomes unstoppable.